Today, we become legends.
Alright, so just a pretty quick video today because I'm working on the support guide, so that'll be out soon, or soonish, as fast as I can finish it. But they take a lot of work, so I like to do some sort of more simpler videos in the meantime while I work on those. But I'm going to be doing a relics tier list. I have all 12, I think it is. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5... Oh, 14. I have all 14 relics for Smite in here, and I'm going to be talking about the normal forms and also the upgraded forms and just placing them on this tier list in where I think they should be, essentially. So, like, C tier is going to be the relics that you should almost never pick up, or, like, they're very situational. And, like, A tier is going to be the default relics that are pretty good, but you're not really necessarily going to pick them up every game. And then the S plus relics are going to be, like, essential pickups for their class. So, let's just get straight into it. These are ordered in... Is it alphabetical? Has to be, right? Yeah, alphabetical. So, we're going through in alphabetical order. First up is Blink, which is an S plus relic, hands down. I think people always undervalue Blink. Less so lately, but in the entire history of Smite, people have massively undervalued how powerful Blink is. It's honestly probably the best relic in the game. Maybe it loses to Beads. I'm not sure, because Beads is, like, literally essential on almost everyone, aside from tanks. But, yeah, Blink is an insanely good relic. Like, being able to have mobility without having to use your mobility is super powerful. Like, both for assassins that can blink in and then use their mobility to chase or get out afterwards. For gods that just like to blink because they have no other way of initiating, like Geb, for example. Geb without blink has no way to do a big initiation, really. Like, you're not really going to roll into people as Geb. That doesn't really work. It's too telegraphed. So, yeah, you can, like, blink in and ult with that, like, blink a color and ult, stuff like that. And just in general, having extra mobility that you god wouldn't normally have. Mobility is super important in Smite, and blink is always going to be really good, I think, unless they put it on an insanely long cooldown. So, yeah, definitely an S plus relic. So, Bracer... I'm talking about Conquest of this, by the way, because it does make a difference. Like, Bracer in Duel, as far as I know, is like an S plus relic. Almost everyone buys Bracer in Duel because it's so important in the 1v1. Like, if they burst you in the 1v1, use their ult or something, you can heal a bunch of that up. But in terms of Conquest viability, I think Bracer's like either a B or an A. Probably a B. Because I don't think it's really like a balanced relic that you're always thinking about picking up but only do it sometimes. It's more of like a very niche relic that you're not really picking up too much. I do think it's very underrated, though. Like, I think a lot of people would say, like, Bracer's C tier because no one ever buys it, but honestly, the upgraded form is kind of like old Beads used to be. It reduces your cooldowns by 3 seconds, which can be actually pretty huge for, like, outplay potential, because you can just, like, blow all your cooldowns, and then if you Bracer, it can just, like, bring you back into the fight as, like, an assassin or something like that. But ultimately, assassins need to buy Beads Blink, and that's why Bracer sees no play. I feel like if either Beads or Blink weren't always, like, essential on assassins, you might see Bracer on them potentially. Same thing with squishies. They almost always have to buy Beads Aegis. And if Aegis didn't exist, for example, you might see Bracer, but it's kind of overshadowed by other options, basically. So, not complete trash, that's why it's not C tier. It's more overshadowed than it is bad. But yeah, I think B tier is pretty good for Bracer. Cursed Ankh. So, the thing is with this, it's very situational. I'm going to be trying to take into account the changes in the mid-season patch, because Cursed Ankh and Sunder, and maybe others. I think just Cursed Ankh and Sunder, though, were changed in the mid-season patch to be, like, shield hate now, so that they take away shields. So I will factor that in. It makes Curse a little bit less niche, because it sort of has 2 niches now. It's, like, an anti-heal item, and it's also an anti-shield item, so maybe you pick it up against, like, Nike or Geb, or if the enemy team goes 2 shells, potentially. But, honestly, it's still very niche. I think I'll put it in B, though. It has its uses, definitely. Like, against healing comps, it's definitely worth picking up an Ankh, especially if they're running anything with shields. Like, if they're running a healer plus anything with shields, like healer plus Nike, healer plus a couple of shells, healer plus Geb, anything like that, you do want this. So I think B tier is a pretty good place for it. Very underrated part of this item as well is that the upgrade is, I think it's 15 or something like that, but enemies take increased damage when they're under the effect of Ankh, so you can really, like, burst people down with it with the upgrade, so it's pretty good. Frenzy is super underrated relic. I'm going to put it in S. No one buys it, but people should buy it, honestly. It's a really good relic for your support, or maybe even your solo laner, depending on what they need, because sometimes solo laners need, like, Blink and Thorns. Like, that's often a good combo for solos. But if your solo laner specifically doesn't need either Blink or Thorns, picking up a Frenzy can be good. And on support is definitely a really good relic for one of your slots on support, because you tend to go these more, like, big team fighting relics on supports with Relic Dagger and things. This is really good, super underrated. Like, it's really good for sieging and burning objectives. Like, if you're the type of player that likes to shred objectives super fast and get ahead because of that, and not necessarily in the team fights, because in team fights you can pop Frenzy and the enemy can kind of back off and you don't necessarily get a lot of value from it, but in like a sieging situation when you want to burn down a Phoenix, or if you want to burn Fire Giant or something, it's super underrated, I think. Curse is good. Honestly, a little overrated. Personally, I think. It's definitely very good, but people pick it up all the time, and I feel like it's too easy to counter. Like, if you pick this up in first slot, the enemy just picks up a sprint, and it doesn't do all that much. Like, the damage reduction is super good, but the slow is overrated, personally. It's way too easy to get slow immunity, especially, like I said, if you buy this in first slot, the enemy can just buy a sprint. I'm torn between A or S, because like, I don't think it's quite as good as Frenzy. But I feel like it maybe deserves a better placement than A. I'll leave it in A for now, and I'll see what else I want to put in A and S, and see if it fits in either one better. Meditation's garbage, dude. Obviously, talking about Conquest again, like, if you're playing Assault, Meditation's S+ tier, because you need to sustain, and, but I don't know, it's too easy to counter. Like, it's healing, so it's really easily countered by any kind of anti-heal. That's my Discord, by the way, don't need to check yours. Yeah, it's really countered by anti-heal. It's honestly not that good even if it isn't countered by anti-heal. Like, the upgrade is just regen, I think, unless they change that. So it's not really insane if you upgrade it, whereas like some of the other upgrades on relics are super good. Like, upgraded Shell is insane. Upgraded Emblem is very good as well. I almost don't want to put it in C tier, but are you ever really going to pick up Meditation in Conquest over like the other alternatives for your support, like Shell, Frenzy, Horrific, Sprint? You're never going to, are you? And that's kind of what C tier is for. Like, it's a relic you're never going to want to pick up over the competition, which is kind of just true of Meditation in Conquest. Like, in Assault, obviously, buy Meditation, definitely, but for Conquest, it's too easily countered and doesn't do enough compared to the other relics. Phantom, also C tier, I think. It's way too situational. It counters, what, 2 gods? Maybe 3? If you count, like, Kabrakan and Ymir, and then also Odin, obviously. You're not buying Phantom against Thor, ever. So it's really just a counter to like 2 specific picks, and otherwise you're never picking up Phantom. The upgrade has something useful, I think. I actually forget what it is because no one ever buys this relic, but it has some kind of useful component, like maybe damage reduction. I think it's damage reduction for the people that you hit with it, which is good, don't get me wrong, but if you have to upgrade the relic for it to be even slightly useful, I don't know, it doesn't seem that good. And like without its upgrade, its only niche use is against Odin, maybe Kabrakan and Ymir if a really good Kabrakan or Ymir player is messing you up with the walls, so yeah, I think C tier. Beads is S+, obviously. I don't think anyone disputes this. Beads is probably the best relic in the game. Like I said when I was talking about Blink earlier, these two kind of compete. It's just essential. There's so much CC in this game, and if you get hit by 1 CC in a late game team fight, you insta-die if you don't have beads a lot of the time. Especially if it's a really potent CC, like if a Hercules Earthbreakers you. If you don't have beads, he's going to drive and strike you into his team and you're dead, so just like, you need beads, basically. I don't think anyone's arguing that this shouldn't be S+. CC immunity is way too strong, especially considering you can use it under the effects of CC, so if you've already been hit by that stun, you can still just use beads to get out of it. It's way too good. Aegis, I think, is S. It's almost essential on squishies, but I feel like it's kind of not, but it is. It's strange. I think this is kind of like Horrific, where it's hovering between A and S. Aegis is probably hovering between S and S+, but I don't think it's as good as Beads Blink. Beads Blink are just better, in my opinion, but it's probably better than Frenzy. In fact, it's definitely better than Frenzy. So it would kind of be in the middle if that was an option. But yeah, Aegis is still really good. Like, any squishy loves to have Aegis. Usually a squishy with like low mobility or something like that that's going to get focused, mostly mages and hunters. Junglers tend to not build Aegis, they want Blink too much. But yeah, it's really good. You can dodge abilities with it completely, and it can save your life a lot of the time, but it is also, it stops you from doing anything, so like you can kind of just, the enemy can wait out your Aegis a lot of the time and kill you afterwards, but it can buy you really important time for like, to get some peel from your support or for your team to show up, or just to like block 800 damage from a Major or something. It's definitely a really good relic. So Shell is definitely S. For me with Shell, I think it is actually hovering on S+. Same thing as Aegis, because Shell is like, everyone thinks Shell's super good, and I still think it's underrated. That's how good Shell is. Shell is just like the go-to. Like, you never don't want to get Shell, ever. Because the block stacks are always going to be good if the enemy has any kind of ADC god. Like, any god that's going to hit hard with basics, super good. If they have anything like a Mercury in jungle, Shell becomes the best relic in the game. So, and like, just the shield is really good. Like, it's kind of like Meditation, but it's not countered by anti-heal because it's a shield. I mean, I guess you could say it's now countered by like Sunder and Cursed Ankh, but that's kind of a niche counter. I think Cursed Ankh only halves shield, so you still get some value from Shell, even if they curse after you Shell. And Spear is, Sundering Spear is only single target, so you get value from Shell no matter what, even with the new shield hate that's coming into the game. And honestly, it's just good. Like, do you ever think, I don't want Shell? Not really. Unless you specifically need, like, a combo of 2 of the other team fighting relics. Like, if you specifically need Curse and Sprint, for example, you might forgo Shell, but it's honestly really good. Shell is, like, one of the best relics in the game. Thorns? It's either S or A. I'm going to go A because while Thorns is really good and it's sort of the only way that solo laners nowadays can actually dive a backline safely without just getting nuked because there's so much tank hate in the game now. Everything in the game just seems to be favoring damage dealers and hating tanks. So it's really hard for solo laners to actually get into the backline, and they use Thorns because of that. And I feel like it boosts Thorns usage stats when really it's not insane. It's just kind of necessary to allow your solo laner to do backline dives, because without it you kind of can't. You just get shredded by the enemy ADC. So it's sort of, it fills a role that it needs to, but it's not specifically powerful in its own right. It's just the best thing that you can kind of get as a solo laner to be able to do your backline dives. So it's more of a problem with solo laners. Like, I think if solo laners were as powerful as they were in, like, Season 1 and 2, for example, Thorns would not see a lot of play. You would be going other things because you wouldn't need the Thorns for you to actually do your job. But as it is right now with all the tank hit, you need Thorns on a solo laner, so I'll put it in A because you do often consider picking it up, and I would argue it's almost essential on some solo laners, but like I said, that's only because of circumstance, not because the relic itself is actually super powerful. Sprint is I want to say this is like an AS kind of hovering one again. Don't know whether I want to... I feel like it's better than these A tier picks, but it's probably on the level of Frenzy, I would say. Maybe a little better, but not quite as good as Aegis and Shell, but I think it probably belongs in S. Like, Sprint is a really good relic. It hard counters Horrific Emblem, obviously, like I said before. If the enemy picks up Horrific Emblem in first slot, that's why you tend to not pick up Emblem in first slot. It's good for early aggression, but the enemy can just get a Sprint at level 12 and it counters you. So you tend to want to get Emblem in level 12 to try and dodge the enemy getting a Sprint. But Sprint's just really good. Like, the extra movement speed is super nice to have for, like, engaging or disengaging super quickly. And the haste effect is just, honestly, invaluable. Like, especially if you put it on your Hunter, they have the Vitalis effect. They can just run people down. And it's sort of like Shell in the way that you're never really unhappy to buy a Sprint. So it just fills a slot that, like, you're happy with, basically. Sunder before the changes that are coming in the mid-season patch would maybe be C, because you were never buying Sunder unless you're trolling or just want, like, a really aggressive start to try and, like, land a first wood and snowball the game. But I think after the patch it's maybe B, kind of like Cursed Ankh, because it is really a hard counter to any kind of shields now. Like, if the enemy picks Nike, you're definitely buying a Sunder and upgrading it, because as soon as she ults, you Sunder her and she dies, basically, because Nike really relies on that shield. But even just, like, Sundering a Geb shield is probably good enough, because the relic itself does do stuff. It's not just shield hit. It does, I think it's % max health or % current health damage, and then increased damage taken once you upgrade it. So, like, if you Sunder a Geb shield off someone, because if someone's getting Geb shielded, they're probably a key target that wants to be kept alive, so if you make that key target take increased damage and also remove the Geb shield entirely, that's really good, but it's still very niche. You're not picking Sunder up every game at all. You're picking it against specific shields, or if you want to just land really aggressive first bloods. And finally, TP. I think TP's A. We're seeing a lot now that TP's not completely essential on solo laners. Like, if it was a completely essential always first buy, I would maybe put it in S. But, honestly, we're seeing now that, like, a lot of people are starting Blink on solo laners and not going TP. So it kind of proves that you don't necessarily need it, but it's still TP. It's always been good in solo. If you need a free back, if you want to buy, like, an item early, or if you just want a fairly safe laning phase without getting bullied out too much, because you can just recall every, however long it is, 200 seconds or something like that, and just get a full health bar back and refill your chalice. So it's always going to be good, I think, teleport. Even though it's been nerfed a lot in the patches. Like, it used to be able to teleport to walls without having to upgrade it. Now you have to upgrade it, but it's still a decent relic. It's probably going to be ever present as, like, a decent pickup in solo. So I think A tier is pretty good for that. And yeah, that's pretty much our relic tier list. If I had to go with... In fact, let me order these. Can you... Yeah, you can reorder them. Let me order these real quick. I think Beads is better than Blink. Can I... There we go. So Bead's best relic in the game, followed by Blink. Then Shell. Aegis. Sprint is better than Frenzy, I think. Here, probably... Yeah, Horrific is the best here. TP probably... No, actually, I think AT is fine. Just because of the circumstances right now, Thorns is picked up probably more than Teleport, because often people go Blink Thorns in solo. And even if they don't, they often go TP Thorns, or like TP Blink. But yeah, I think Thorns probably sees a bit more play than Teleport right now, but like I said, it's just because of circumstance, really. In the past, TP would have definitely been a lot better. Down here, for Conquest, Ankh is probably better than Bracer, as is Sunder. I think Bracer is probably the lower end of this tier for Conquest. Before the buffs, these two would have been a bit lower, but after the buffs, they're decent for like shield hit. And then I honestly think Phantom is better than Med. I think Med's the worst relic in the game for Conquest. Actually, no. No, I'll put Med above, because you can buy Med in more situations. It is easily counterable, but Phantom is like, you literally never buy it unless you're against like specific walls that you need it for. You're never buying Phantom otherwise, so it's too niche for me to put it higher. I think it's not necessarily the worst relic in the game, that's the thing. It's very situational, whereas Med is just bad in almost all situations. But I think on average, if you go like across 100 games or something, you would see more situations where you want Med than where you want Phantom. So I'll put Phantom at the bottom. So yeah, that's ordered now. So Bead's best, Phantom worst, and then just as you go through the tiers, it's ordered, I think. So Bead's, Blink, and Shell, Aegis are like the top 4 relics in my opinion. They always see consistent play, they're pretty much essential. Like, Shell's almost essential for support, but not quite. Beads and Blink are essential for junglers, Beads for any squishies. Aegis is pretty much essential for squishies, unless you want to try some like interesting Blink stuff, or I've seen a lot of people picking up upgraded Shell, especially against Mercury on squishies. So, yeah. That's my relic tier list. Let me know your guys' thoughts down below. I'm sure some of it will be widely agreed upon, like Beads, Blink being the best 2 relics in the game. I don't think anyone argues that. But my low placement of Aegis maybe might tick a few people off. I think a lot of people will put Aegis in S+ because they think it's really broken, but I think it does have counters. It's not insane. Also, my high placement of Frenzy, like Frenzy above Horrific. I think Horrific sees more play, but I think Frenzy is actually a better relic. And maybe my low placement of Meditation, but Meditation's trash. Don't buy it, please. But yeah, that's it. See you guys in another video later on, and peace out, you nerds.